Hi, I'm Prita Kemal Ghani. I'm the CEO and the founder of the London School of Public Relations Jakarta, and I'm the president of ASEAN Public Relations Network. I also appointed as the chair of Asia Pacific Regional Councils of a Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communications Management. Global Alliance and APRN knows that education and training play a significant role in the services offered by our members worldwide. Continuing education and training in public relations and communications are the basis for professionals to enhance and strengthening our personal and communications capability. That's why we at the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management have decided that April 2021 as a Global Education and Training Month. With this long month focus, we wish to unify Global Alliance and APRN members' activities and multiply our collective effort. This time around, I have been appointed to lead the GA Education and Training Month campaign as the chair. As part of the campaign, APRN ASEAN Public Relations Network is preparing various content such as video on demand, webinar, conferences to be shared to Global Alliance and APRN members for free. In this opportunity, I would like to invite you to participate and support on this Global and Education and Training Month. See you!
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for our event this afternoon. I am Nadine Samala, and it is my pleasure to be facilitating today's event entitled Global Alliance Education and Training Month 2021 live session with the topic Business and Financial Public Relations in the Edge of Pandemic. In this afternoon, I would like to say welcome to our honorable speakers. First off, Ms. Nia Pratiwi, Managing Director of Indonesia Bersin Khan and Wolf. Second up is Mr. Mark Castro, Secretary General of the Philippine Business Club Indonesia. And unfortunately for our third speaker, which is Ms. Puni, she wouldn't be able to join for us today due to medical reasons, so let's wish her for her speedy recovery. Moving forward in this beautiful afternoon, I would also like to welcome our staff and our lecturers, and last but not the least, a warmest welcome to our beloved students and our participants for today. ASEAN Public Relations Network, in collaboration with Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management, organized the second Global Alliance Education and Training Month for the whole month of April 2021. Continuing education and training in public relations and communications are the basis for professionals to enhance and strengthen our personal and communication capabilities. That's why the Global Alliance and APRN are dedicating April 2021 for global education and training. This time around, Mrs. Prita Kemal Gani, MBA, MCIPR, APR, as the chair of Asia Pacific for Global Alliance, has been appointed to lead the GA Education and Training Month campaign. As part of the campaign, APRN is preparing various contents such as video on demand, webinars, and conference from expert speakers from all over the world. Every Friday for the whole month of April 2021, APRN will be holding live webinar sessions from a list of powerhouse speakers. Today marks as the last webinar before the final live conference that will be next Friday. Without wasting more time and moving on to our main session of this beautiful afternoon, please allow me to introduce our handsome moderator for today, Mr. Alexis, 7 years of experience in financial analysis and we have a proven track record of financial reducing cost, efficiency, and in finance by analyzing and resolving complex accounting. He is exploring the opportunities in cryptocurrency by investing for long-term outcome and short-term trading to understand the changes in certain markets. Currently, he is the deputy head of finance at and a lecturer and entrepreneur. Further ado, to miss the screening.
Thank you, Ms. Nadine, for that wonderful introduction. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the people behind working in this webinar for inviting me as the moderator for today's edition. Now, before we kick things off, I would like to reintroduce myself. My name is Alexis Lamoste. I'm the Deputy Head of Finance and Control here in LSPR. I've been working here in LSPR for 2 years now, and I've been exposed for more than 7 years in terms of financial sector. Now, I also took my majors here my master's here in LSPR, concentrating in international communication and in business development. Now, let me start by introducing our guest speakers for today. First is Mr. Mark Castro, Secretary General of Philippine Business Club Indonesia. Mr. Mark Castro is an organizational management consultant, investment advisor, strategic communications expert, and conducts government relations for clients in key countries in Southeast Asia. He has worked on special projects for the Indonesian government as special rapporteur to the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries on the first Ocean Investment Summit, the International Marine Organization Summit on Piracy held in Indonesia, and the 10th Asian African Conference, for which he has conferred a special plaque of appreciation. He has also assisted in bringing several Indonesian companies to invest in the Philippines, such as the publicly listed Passport Indonesia while assisting the billion-dollar company Petesido Muncul's Tolak Angin and Pete Eagle Pharma's V Fresh. He is the president director of the foreign investment firm PMA, Pete Jump Digital Indonesia, and represents the entry of Indonesia's billion-dollar state-owned company and publicly listed Pete Pepe Construction Investment Company to the Philippines. Now, our second speaker for today is Ms. Nia Pratiwi, Managing Director of Indonesian Burson Conan Wolf. Nia Pratiwi is market leader of BCW Indonesia. With more than 20 years of experience, Nia's background spans corporate communications, public affairs, and stakeholder engagement. Prior to joining BCW, she spent 6 years with Fleshman Hilliard in Jakarta, where she was senior vice president, overseeing the firm's public affairs, corporate communications, and crisis practice. Earlier in her career, she was a journalist, then a senior information and communications officer at the Australian Embassy and the Australian government's aid program, before moving on to the public affairs role at APCO. Her roles inspired her to co-found her own CSR consulting firm, Engage Indonesia, in 2006. Nia began her communications career in advocacy, community development, and policy change at the United Nations Population Fund, where she supported the establishment of the Indonesian Forum of Parliamentarians on Population and Development. This forum continues to be a focal point for advancing Indonesian policy at all levels, from national to district. She completed her postgraduate degree in Management Communications and Public Policy from Waikato University in New Zealand. Now, to start things off, let me give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Mark Castro.
Thank you, Alexis. Who's going to handle the presentation? Do I have access, or can you guys share it from your end?
We
Good
will
afternoon,
share.
Miss Nia. Good afternoon to all the attendees of this event. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you and welcome to this gathering. And I hope that we can have a robust discussion after this. Next slide, please. Our core idea when the pandemic or any crisis happens is that we look towards thought leadership because it is the guiding force that would help us overcome uncertainty. Next slide, please. The challenge right now, more than the pandemic itself during this contagion, is that there seems to be a lack of consolidated and verified information going around, so that our biggest challenge is finding the solution wherein we can be properly guided. So, as you see, there's a lot of proliferation of fake news, whether through social media or through news information that we come across. Next slide, please. This is one classic example that I wanted to share with you of a famous person in America, which, as you know, America is currently suffering, together with India, a high end of contagion. And this guy was asking why there wasn't a shutdown from COVID 2 to 3 all the way to 17 and 18, and why suddenly COVID 19 there's a lockdown. And he has completely denied the existence of COVID. He's got millions of followers, but as of April 20, he contracted the virus, which we can see um, the challenge in the misinformation. Next slide, please. The role of public relations in itself vary according to your direction and your strategy, but guided by your collective board or the leadership itself, it could provide the greatest impact for your company as you share your mission, your vision, and your value proposition. And this is what news stories pick up: what really matters, what's really important, and what's really truthful. Next slide, please. As you know, um, the COVID pandemic has really changed the way people move around in most parts of the world. We have not seen anything like this, at least in my lifetime. I have never seen a virus that has suspended most of the operations of people globally. I didn't see it with AIDS. I didn't see it with the previous SARS virus. I didn't see it with HI, HIV, and I didn't see it with just about the other viruses that are out there. But the difference is that because of social media right now, we have seen the spread of information much faster than we used to during our earlier days. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the focus on thought leadership is what will guide us to confront challenges. So, the most important thing is that we collate verifiable data within ourselves, have a concrete idea of the strategy of communicating the messages, because it is through this critical time that we can confront crises, challenges, including the pandemic. So regardless whether you own your own blog, news website, or podcast, or just your regular Facebook page, be sure that you're not passing off unverified information. So that's part of the thought leadership that we're looking at. Next slide, please. So as far as our organization is concerned, wherein our stakeholders are the investors coming from the Philippines that we manage in Indonesia, or Indonesian companies that we manage and assist for their entry to the Philippine market, we look at the bigger picture, which is ASEAN. So when the pandemic happens, we looked at the focus on what our governments in ASEAN are doing, much like the ASEAN PR here, and we sought their thought leadership as to where we are headed. And for that event, what we did was invite authorities from this sector. Next slide, please. So we wanted to discuss the economic recovery of ASEAN and what the governments are doing, because as you know, part of the concern of the public in ASEAN is the sustainability of their employment. So we know that there's enough information and activity on healthcare, but as far as our stakeholders are concerned, with large corporations employing people, they needed to know the sustainability of their business. So on the next slide, you will see the key messages that we wanted to drive at. Authority. So we sought out the ASEAN Deputy Secretary General for Economic Community, and the solutions that he provided and shared during the forum that we had, and clarity. So if you can identify these three strategies on how you want to communicate your message, how you want to assure the public and give reassurance as well to the investors, we were hoping that we can show them how to confront these challenges. For the next slide, you will see that we wanted to focus on what we were busy with, which is the management of investment traffic between Indonesia and the Philippines, which combined population represent more than half of the entire population of ASEAN. We're looking at about 270 right now in Indonesia and about 110 in the Philippines. So combined, that's about 380 million people over a 600 million entire population of ASEAN. Next slide, please. So we wanted to show where Indonesia was headed as far as its economy is concerned. Next slide, please. From here, following the same premise, we invited the deputy chairman from BKPM that manages the traffic of investments from foreign countries to Indonesia, and we invited deputy chair of Kadin because from the private sector, they're the perfect business matches and partners of foreign investors in the country. The result was you will be visible on the next slide. So following the same principles, we sought out authority and they provided the solutions and the clarity that came from the robust discussions with the audience. So sometimes it's not just a question of a concrete solution, but a concrete path towards that solution. For instance, the Indonesian parliament approved the omnibus bill that has now become a law. But the implementing rules and regulations for the omnibus law is yet to be executed. But at least this gives an assurance of what the Indonesian government wants for foreign investors and including Indonesian companies to comply with. This provides a better understanding of the economic progress of Indonesia during the pandemic. As for the Philippines, what we did was we created this event that you will see on the next slide, where we invited our Secretary of Finance, the President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce, and the executive director of the Makati Business Club. The Makati Business Club may be a small club. I think you could compare them, let's say, to a Sudirman Financial Club or something like that. So it's filled with a lot of the major investors in the Philippines. And what we wanted to do was provide the same clarity to our stakeholders, investors, including Indonesian companies that are interested to enter the Philippine market. Because at the end of the day, the ASEAN economic integration doesn't stop even though there is a pandemic. So on the next slide, the key messages that we were able to deliver were the authority, the solutions, and the clarity. So again, we revolve around these three principles so that we can provide the clarity that the public needs during this time of crisis. So it doesn't have to be limited to the pandemic. It doesn't have to be just the contagion, but it can also be about any crisis that our countries or industries are confronted with. So for the next slide, what I wanted to share with you for our end of the month meeting will be on tourism, which is one of the most heavily affected industries in the region. So what we did is invite the authorities from these sectors that you will see on the next slide. We've received confirmation from our cabinet secretary for the Department of Tourism and the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy in Indonesia, together with the welcome address coming from Ministry of Law and Human Rights. So the key takeaway, again, for this part of the project will be visible on the next slide. Following the same premise of seeking the highest level of authority to speak on a subject that we really want, will provide a clearer guideline to our audience. So we never veer away from that. We wanted vetted information, we wanted actual plan, and from there we hope that it develops into a solution that our audience can participate in. So on the next slide, we wanted to keep it simple and short. We always revisit the plans of our organization, and we are always focused on fact and not fiction, and we allow science and not our personal opinions to shape the policies that we have for our organization. And lastly, the clarity of message is very important, and we utilize all the digital assets that we have in order to spread the information we wanted to share. And each person in our organization, and just like in any other organization or including a school, you have your own network of friends from which you can share the information you want to share. Next slide, please. Here are some of the learning exercises that I wanted to share with you that we thought really received a lot of impact. If you can see from this campaign that Burger King created, it consolidated a lot of the elements that most people felt around the world during the contagion. So they were courageous enough to discuss their competitors. They were courageous enough to confront the situation. And at the end of the day, they leveled the playing field by saying that regardless of which of our competitors, including us, that you choose, will be good for the economy. It's a rare takeoff from what is normally a business practice of delivering black PR to your competitors. On the next slide is a complete contrast of the same message. Here, what you will see is the failure of delivering concrete information that is now happening in India, which is one of the worst hit countries in the world in terms of resurgence of the virus. So, what the public is really clamoring for here is that their leadership wasn't able to convey of what is really going on. And so people tended to relax and people tended to ignore health protocols, and the government was late in delivering that message. That's why on the last slide that I will share with you, as you can see, Indonesia at one point was the number one case in the entire Southeast Asia and the fourth in the 48 countries in Asia. But because of what has happened recently in the Philippines, it has now become the number one in Southeast Asia in terms of active cases. Now, you have to remember, Indonesia right now is going through the same challenge. We are continually addressing it, but we became number two, not because of some magical thing that we were able to implement in Indonesia, but simply because it got worse in the Philippines. So the key message here is that let's not put our guards down. Let's not be overconfident because the virus is still around. So this is the key message that we want to drive and to share with our organization. So on the next slide, you can see, again, to just reiterate, we didn't improve our active cases. We are still confronted with them. We are still fighting that. But we became second, not because of what we're doing, but because it simply got worse in the Philippines right now. So on the next slide, this is the organization that we have. What we really do is assist Indonesian companies enter to the Philippine market, and Philippine companies are encouraged to invest in the largest market in Southeast Asia. And in between, our organization provides all the policies of the government for compliance for both countries. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you for that excellent presentation, Mr. Mark Castro. I'm sure our audiences learned a lot from your presentation. Now let's go to the question and answer session. You can type in your question in the chat box, or you can ask our speaker directly by turning on your camera. Okay, let me start by asking Mr. Mark Castro a question. Mr. Mark, based from your presentation there, I would like to ask, has your business model changed and how are you adapting to that change? I think you're on mute, Mr.
Okay, tremendously. When our organization began 5 years ago, we were doing high level offline events. We were doing a lot of travel. We accompanied about 14 Indonesian billionaires to the Philippines that resulted in several investments to the Philippines. Like, for instance, we're proud that Alpha Mart is now available in the Philippines with 800 branches. So it's a lot of these things, and we were accompanying Philippine billionaires to Indonesia to look at the investment opportunities as well. And about 2 years ago, we started the first ever Philippine Indonesia Economic and Investment Summit, where cabinet secretaries and Indonesian ministers attended as speakers to our event. Now, we had a great momentum on this. It was very much well attended, but because of the pandemic, we had to shift our focus and do everything online. Now, we're still doing the same thing. As you can see, we're still inviting cabinet ministers and government officials, but everything is done online. So that's how we shifted quickly with what we were doing, and we're just waiting for the time when it's much safer to conduct offline events and travel again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Castro. How about our audiences? Do you have any questions, guys? You can type in the chat box, or you can ask Mr. Castro directly by turning on your camera.
By the way, if I may, the deck is already with the admin. So if any of you would like to review it, please feel free.
Okay, Mr. Castro, can I ask one more thing? Um, how are you able to protect your company's public image in terms of finance during pandemic?
It's much easier for us because, as an organization representing so many companies that have sought our assistance, we always guide them towards government compliance. So whatever is needed by the company, we address them to work with the respective governments that they are in, and we assist them through our professional services, how they can share the status of their financials to their stakeholders, investors, or their consumers. Now, because of this transparency, a lot of the subscribers that they have understand equally the suffering and challenges that they are confronted with. But fortunately, they can see as well that there is a roadmap to economic recovery. So investors are assured, and government is likewise assured because of the commitment that they have to continue despite the pandemic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Castro. And lastly, Mr. Castro, do you have any last messages to our audiences here?
Yes. Yes. Whether you're talking to your friends, whether you're talking to your colleagues, whether you're talking to your classmates or your professors, please always vet the information that you share. It's so easy to get confused with the noise that are out there in social media, even in news links that are sometimes so malicious that they add a little letter or number uh, to a serious website, and then suddenly you're led to a different website providing all these conspiracy theories and all these fake news. So I think that's a core message I would like to share, because that's what would really become a very good foundation by which we share all other principles. Thank you.
Again, I would like to thank Mr. Castro for sharing his thoughts and information to our audiences. So to summarize everything about Mr. Castro's presentation here, he emphasized on the focus on leadership during pandemic, emphasizing on unverified information about the economic recovery of ASEAN, considering more than half of the population is represented by Filipinos and Indonesians. He also emphasized on authority, solutions, and clarity to provide help during this pandemic to avoid confusion. And lastly, we need to verify facts, not fiction, and using science, not opinion. Okay. Thank you again, Mr. Castro, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Now let's go to our second speaker for this afternoon, Miss Nia Pratiwi. So, Miss
Hello.
Nia Pratiwi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alexis. And I also enjoyed the presentation of Mr. Castro. It provides me insight as well as some similarity, although what do you call it? Our industry might be a little bit different. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to be here. Um, So what I'm going to share today, and I hope my deck is ready. Yes, um, is actually sharing how things look at the perspective of a PR agency as one of the business entity. Um, the discussion that I will carry on will be somewhat, what do you call it, practical and also experimental journey, or what a practitioner like myself would encounter in a day-to-day work in a PR agency. So let's start. Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So actually, I have four agendas today. Is one of it is that actually we need to be realistic in looking at the changes and uh, realizing that have everything changed, or is there something that remained the same? The second is that what are the trends, if there is any trends during this pandemic timing? And then where we are now and where are the clients now that will force us to fine tune our strategy. And last but not least, I will touch upon examples that would provide as a reference for our future what do you call it, communication campaign. So again, has everything changed? Next. What we understood is that we are now in the midst of constant changing. We have to change in attitude, and behavior are also changing. And either it's going to be us or the company or our clients, they need to pay attention and adapt to the changes as soon as possible. And we also understood that now is the time for the new normal, and it's steadily forming. It hasn't come to a final stage. It hasn't create a solid formation, but again, uh, it's going to be there, and we have to react to the short-term change, but don't ever lose sight of the long-term vision. And this will drive us to finding a new way, redefining our strategy and tactics to adapt to the new normal. And by doing so, we need to be agile and creative. Okay, so next. Okay, in 2020, it was an extraordinary year, a lot of challenges. It's impacting all the business across the globe. Either you're in the agriculture or you're in the travel industry, entertainment, every sector are impacted. And what we can see is that there are, and everyone is impacted. The differentiation is that how bad are you impacted by the issue? We may say that travel and hospitality down below might be the most sector that is being hit. And we can also presume that technology, knowing that internet is being used and we rely heavily on state-of-the-art technology, that technology seems to be running pretty well. And how about the real estate? And how about the health and wellness industry? These are things that we need to take into consideration when we support our client and we have our business as a solution oriented, that everything is impacted and everything is different. Next. But apart from the chaos, apart from the changes that we encounter day by day, something may be the same. And to be honest, public relations, its function and its what you call the needs are remain intact, remain the same. It is a process that refers to the action that company needs to create and create its image and foster relationship with their consumer, their employees, their audience, and also their stakeholder. And this is why public affairs are still needed. And what we hope from those kind of engagement is that we learn and we ask for trust from our audience, which positively promotes our business reputation. Next. Okay. So where are our clients and how business feel in the middle of this pandemic? We understood that it has been more than a year since the pandemic hit, and we are too naive to say that probably after everyone is vaccinated, business will go on as usual. Well, hope is still there, and there will always be possibility and also opportunity. But here, what I consider and I see from a day-to-day engagement with my clients from various business sector is that we're still adjusting, adapting, and aligning. This means that people take time to adjust to the new normal that has been presented in front of them for more than a year. And it still seems like it's a sudden impact to our day-to-day behavior. And with the COVID-19 situation, prolonging, people worry about finances as well. So they prepare more on they were looking more on the low-hanging fruit. They prepare to plan for a long term, but they would let go to heavy spend occasion or events. And with the acceptance of the new normal, people will find ways to manage life. Next. So with this kind of pandemic, this changes, is there trends that happening in the business sector? Well, I would say that yes, there are trends. Next slide. So, but what kind of trends that we can assume when time is very sensitive, priority changes, and there's a high dynamic that can even change in one night. It is not impossible, it is not uncommon that plans changes like a crisis mode in an hourly base, particularly when we were hit early in the what do you call it, the pandemic, the COVID-19, where we come from being confident that it will never hit Indonesia, and the first case came, and then it grow and even grows exponentially, and become Indonesia become one of the biggest country with the COVID situation. So next, yes. So if we squeeze down the trend today and will be in the near future, is everything will go virtual. Health conscious is high, and there a big shift to digital and mental health. If I squeeze it a little bit tighter due to time, and we focus on digital and virtual, then I would like to discuss that what are the transformation happening in the PR arena. Next, please. PR is believed to use heavily mass media to reach the audience, to reach the stakeholder, and to communicate. And actually, before the pandemic, a transformation has already changed. But with the pandemic, there is a major transformation which is much more rapid and much more dynamic. So for the media itself, there has been a transformation since 1998, where landscape of the print and online is geared towards social media. And now with the pandemic and with the social distancing, when people are not being able to gather as much as before, a lot of activity, a lot of news, a lot of information has also shifted to the podcast. So 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, when clients were thinking that a successful event or successful what do you call it, program is being measured by how much coverage that is being merged in the mass media. But now it has been what do you call changing mindset, that news doesn't land finally or doesn't end in a print or online media. It travels to the social media, and it travels further to the podcast, and it becomes a hybrid media. Next. This is an example how media has branched out and how content is very important uh, to generate business and sustainable business in the COVID era. So we can see that, for example, like E-Day, it's an event by Kata Data, and it has generated a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of profit making, doing an event, inviting VIP ministries and CEOs to the event. And it is much weighted by the public as a alternative source of news and information. And we can also see that it has also happened with many other media, like Majalah Swa, which was previously print, become online, and now become an organizer of a routine webinar. We can also see that radio, which was famous at one time and lost its charms, and now it transformed into something more, what do you call it, on the ease of the listener and the audience, called podcast or in Spiegel. So this kind of what do you call it, hybrid, that we need to think when we, as a PR practitioner, as a communication consultant, see that the landscape has changed a lot to the better. Next. And talking about digital trends, this is factual. So communication PR should base their research, to base their strategy with a valid resource and scientific one. This is a survey done by BCW sister company called Kantar in the, what you call, in the first year, first 6 months of a pandemic, that there are increase in online consultation to 34%. And also there's a lot of launches of telemedicine, for example, like Hello Doctor, Good Doctor, and Sehat Q, and other things. And there's also online education courses. We have even the government program by Kartu Prakerja going into e-learning because of face-to-face or offline education is not favorable. Telecommunicating software rises, pay for online entertainment also rise. So here we can make a summary that digital trends will be here, and even though pandemic will hopefully soon be over, this kind of habit will still prevail in the future. Next. So what kind of strategies that we need to think about? Next. Okay. The most important part is that with people being more, what do you call it, reserved with going out, and then human connection is a lesson, and all the digital campaign is running towards us in many platforms. And actually Indonesia has become the top 3 consumers for social media users, such as Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. So we need to provide our audience with a value, not just a business as usual. Company and also public relation practitioner need to show up and do our part, that we care for them, we are there, we don't just do business as usual. We don't just do press release and expect that coverage will go big. And we have to have a problem, we have to solve problem. What I mean by solving problem is actually that whether you are, what do you call it, a lawyer, whether you are a plumber, whether you are a travel, what do you call it, a consultant, you need to be able to solve problem while doing things you've been putting off as well. What I mean by putting off as well is, for example, for a sport company, sport brand, they have to be closer, to be sympathetic, to be sensitive to their audience. They need to reduce or even put down gatherings, but they still need they still need to, what do you call it, do their homework in terms of when business is not this lucrative, fix your website, fix your narrative, fix your key message, fix your roles and responsibility. Those kinds of things need to be taken care of when we develop a strategy to what do you call it, to go forward. And then create future content. Content has and will always be the king. In a narrative, what we consider important as well is that you just don't just go there to make noise. Go there to add value. So that this is what should be thought differently in this era of pandemic, in this era of trying. So, okay, and next. So here we are. I was saying earlier in the previous slide that digital is here. The opportunity is here, and it is true. Currently, we have 275 million people. And then there are 1.5 more million mobile connections. So we can easily assume that even one adult would have 2 mobile sets, or even more than 2 mobile sets. So digital is here, and we can also see that even the lower economic level class also purchase or use mobile more than ever, because their kids are doing online classes. They have to have face-to-face discussion with the teachers. And even, for example, my neighbor who is a mom, she said that from 7 to 10, I can't use my handphone because my kids are using it to study and to communicate with the teacher. And we can also see that social media is here in Indonesia. We are very familiar with YouTube, WhatsApp, IG, or Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And TikTok is also a rising social media that has garnered 30 million plus users. And when we see how big is the user of social media in Indonesia, YouTube 93%, WhatsApp 87%, Instagram 86%. So again, this is an opportunity. But this is also what we call a red ocean. You can't just put your message here. Otherwise, your message will just be a drop in the ocean unnoticed. Next. So here I'm coming to the case study, some examples that we need to consider as a PR practitioner and as a PR agency when we develop consultation on and advise our clients. That empathy is much more needed instead of exploitation. So starting from the emerge of COVID-19, we suggest our clients to be down to earth, to less sale and show more care. Loyalty and trust are critical, and this is a great time to work on emotional connectivity and build trust. with stakeholders and also reinforcing the brand loyalty. Do not assume that since people has less interest and activity outside the house, we don't need to be engaged with our stakeholders. Stakeholders are still watching us. They will remember our actions when the pandemic is over. Phrases that used to be aggressive, like, hey, come. This is, for example, like, what do you call it? Lazada or booking.com or many shopping platforms that say come for the killer promotion and or contagious dent beat. Now we try to soften it and make the campaign more softer or much more softer. For example, one of the best campaign that I consider is like IKEA's Make Home Count video. So this kind of approach that shares or encourage viewers to make them feel loved, feel cared during the lockdown are very much appreciated. Next. So here, this is the continuation from IKEA. So look at the narrative, look at the chosen words. They touch you emotionally. The world is full of things that are out of our control, but at home, you get to choose. So choose joy, choose comfort, choose peace and quiet, choose beauty, choose to share what you like with people you love. At home, you can be whoever you want to be because home is a different world. Make home count. This is very touching. Imagine that your house now is your world because you don't go to the office, you don't go to the school, you don't go partying, you don't go to the club. You do everything at home and let home be your world. The next case that I would like to show you as well is that the case of Nike. At first glimpse, we will say that Nike, a sport brand, should go outside, should be played outside. And how do Nike make this lockdown and what they call time where people are very, cannot go outside? They create a campaign which is also touching. And they shift the mindset of playing inside, of being inside, rather than going out there, being courageous, fighting, or in the battle of sport is more valuable. The recent Play Inside and Play for the World encourage athletes to share how they are keeping themselves active at home during lockdown across the globe. Not only did the campaign align with Nike brand identity, which probably we all have it in our back of our head, just do it. It also provides inspiration and hope while encouraging people to stay at home. So if you ever dream of playing for millions around the world, now is your chance. Play inside, play for the world. Very touching. Another one. Next, please. So this is something that I would consider, why don't I try to look at campaigns which are in Indonesia, which is close to us. The third case study is about Indosat beats pandemic constraint, Bisa Bangkit Bersama. So here the narrative is also touching. In the midst of uncertain situation, thousands of people at Indosat already keep moving endlessly to unite millions of hearts in Indonesia. With full of spirit, they continue to fight and constantly moving to defy limitation in providing the best service. So things like this kind of narrative is the way to go. and those who are companies who are snob and tapping their own what you call pride may not be a darling to the consumer. Next. So again, what and why does it work? Why does the three campaign works? Next. It works because of, it works because of it has four components that we mentioned before. Adding value to the community, inspiration and encouragement to simply raising of a smile. Second, strong call to action. Let people know that we're here for you. You need us now and when this is over. Third, it's not pushing sales. None of them are pushing sales. None of them are promoting new shoes, new services, new product, home product, furniture. They're mentioning, although they mention it subtly, and they're talking about being the expert, being the solution or provider, and elevating people pains by demonstrating how they can solve their problem. There's too much pain in this pandemic, so why not we create our own happiness? And we are able to create happiness because happiness is in our hand. Next. So there's a way to do better and find it. This is one of my best quote by Thomas Alva Edison. So yeah, that is the end of my discussion. I'm very happy if we can discuss further, or you can also share your experience during this pandemic. Now I'll give it back to the gorgeous moderator, Alexis.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Nia, for that awesome presentation. And you even shared with us a few case studies, which is, I'm sure, is very helpful to our audiences. So now I would like to ask our audiences if you guys have questions to Ms. Nia. Again, you can write down your questions in the chat box, or you can ask Ms. Nia directly just by opening your camera.
Yes, I do have one question from Heidi Isabel, Miss Heidi Isabel. Can PR be successful during the pandemic? And if so, what is the right approach? Please share your insight. Yes, the right approach is the approach that I mentioned earlier, the four approach that do not go into hard selling, and then please add value to their to what you do. This is a time where empathy, sensitivity, and also sharing and caring is the place to do that. So remember last Ramadan, Gojek saying that if you buy GoFood from us, I can also provide you some, what do you call it, some marketing gimmicks that they created very lovely. They said that if you want to donate one portion of the food that you ordered, we will give you to the driver. Those kind of touching, adding the value and adding and uplifting people problem is the way to go. And again, it's a strong call to action in this pandemic, where everything collapsed. We can see that a lot of shops, a lot of mall collapse, hotels collapse, travel agents collapse, small business collapse, big business collapse. We can't work alone. The right approach is to partner. Rather than competing, let's join hands. I also remember Mr. Castro mentioned about McDonald's, which encouraged whatever fast food you buy, whether it's KFC, whether it's other brands, Pizza Hut, the thing is that be brave to partner, to encourage, and to share your credits. I think that is one that I would recommend. And if you would like to ask me whether BCW has worked on such campaign that is successful during this pandemic, yes. We work with NBA, the national, the football league, and through our what do you call our colleagues in India, they did a little bit like what Nike did. They play backyard. They play in their own yard. They play basketball in their own yard, and they generate what do you call it contribution for who would what do you call it auction if they can make a goal, make a shoot, and everything. And in Indonesia itself, you can also see that how many musicians do a collaboration of concert and generate contribution, donation in the era of pandemic to give it back to the society. Those kind of campaign are also successful. Although we can always argue, how do you measure success? If we measure success based on what is hammering inside our heart, inside our mind, and that would be a measure of successful. But if we're thinking the same business as usual as before the pandemic, if a successful campaign can only be measured by generating profit, and that would not be happen in this time of trying. I hope that explains.
All right. Thank you, Miss Nia. Again, how about our audiences? Do you have any questions for Miss Nia? Okay. Can I ask you something, Miss Nia? I have a question here for you. What PR platform do you think is highly effective during pandemic?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So, what are the most lucrative and most affordable, not affordable, effective platform? I would say that it depends. When we see that using the Facebook, the social media, with its algorithm behind it, it's very successful and what do you call it, a efficient way to reach your audience. So social media is the way. The issue here in Indonesia is that whether we have good infrastructure to support the social media to have a good broadband to air or to be engaged with the social media itself. But looking into the trend when, for example, Facebook was once very famous and then it was going down and now it become famous again, and user has go down as well to the mass user, for example, like the CND social economic class, for example, like my assistant, when she goes to kampung, pulang kampung mudik, she still use Facebook. Another example is Twitter. Twitter was at one time left by the users, but it become hip again with the presidential election because of its bite size and how it can really cater the engagement of those who like to tweet, who like to chat. TikTok is also highly effective among the youngster, and it has an incredible algorithm But again, a lot of my clients are not ready to go to that arena yet, because this is something of the untouched territory, something that they are not comfortable with. And actually, when we see again what is recently being a hit now is the clubhouse, where we all have all the CEOs chatting and sharing information. So social media is the way forward. We can also see that how many print media have collapsed, and to be realistic, that bite-sized information are most preferable rather than magazine or a full page newspaper. I think, Alexis, that would be my answer.
Yeah. All right, Miss Nia, thank you for your answer. And again, I would like to ask if our audiences have a question to Miss Nia. Okay. Miss Nia, one last question from our end here. Which PR strategy is more effective? Is it during pre-pandemic or during pandemic?
Which PR strategy is more effective during pandemic or before pandemic?
Pre-pandemic.
This is again, the measurement will be different. Before pandemic, the measurement is the profitability, the numbers, how big the reach is. So it all boils down on the dollar. But during pandemic, it all boils down on the emotional bank account, the emotional feeling. So I would say that it is more challenging to run a campaign during these times of trying, but if you succeed, it is very much more rewarding, because you will be written in the history that what you have done when other are not doing well, or when other were shying away from the issue.
All right. Okay. Thank you again, Miss Nia, for that excellent presentation. And I would like to summarize your presentation, Miss Nia, for our audiences here. So Miss Nia presented to us to reminding us to adapt the new normal, and what roles does PR brought during pandemic, what businesses and clients feel by adjusting, adapting, and aligning, about the digital trends here in Indonesia, and lastly, the trend of social media during pandemic in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So before I pass the floor to Ms. Nadine, I would like to ask, is Mr. Mark still here? Because I think there's a question for Mr. Mark.
Yes, there's a question here
Yes, Mr. Mark.
regarding best and innovative solutions for businesses in the Philippines to overcome the negative implications of unprecedented crisis.
Mr. Mark, are you still here? Uh, Mr. Mark, I think your mic is on mute.
Hi, I disappeared.
All
Can
right,
you
Mr.
hear
Mark.
me?
Yeah, we can see you, Mr.
Yeah.
Mark.
Okay. I am now in two platforms. Anyway, you know, all the economies globally and in Southeast Asia, they've really been affected in unprecedented ways, and everybody's trying to find solution. And as far as best solution is concerned, I have yet to see that. There are good practices, but I don't think they're best solutions because this is very dynamic. Everything is evolving. But as far as the Philippines is concerned, we're actually looking towards Indonesia's business processes that have been successful and are agile enough to bring to the Philippines. For instance, we have a very robust fintech industry in Indonesia, and that's beginning to grow in the Philippines. We have great agri solutions in Indonesia, even though it's not enough to supply all the demands of Indonesia, but it's a good start because agri-industry in the Philippines is also very much needed. So what we tend to do, not just for the Philippines, but all the countries in Southeast Asia, is to look towards our neighbors for solutions that work, solutions that are agile, solutions that we can transform easily and adopt so that we can continually face the challenges that likewise evolve. So these are some of the things that we're seeing right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Mr. Mark. Before I leave you guys, I would like to know if you have any last statements to our audiences. Could you please go first, Miss Nia?
Okay. Well, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. That is not my opinion. That is quote from Albert Einstein. So I'm not that clever. But this year has taught us that, what do you call it? The world has gone through rapid modification. We identified the need to be better understanding and involving milieu of the clients and a market across the sectors. Throughout history, the crisis has caused paradigm shift and galvanized new innovation to suit the new normal. So for us is what do you call it? Managing diversity, inclusivity, agility, and be on forefront of your business. Rise above the uncertainty is key to having a sustainable business and even to grow your business in times of pandemic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Nia. How about to Mr. Mark Castro? Do you have any last statements?
Okay. I think despite the contagion that we have, at the end of the day, as Miss Nia said, the only thing we can control is our own happiness. So let's choose happiness at any given time. When we wake up in the morning, we have two of the greatest gifts that we ever received. And this is the ability to open our two eyes. That means we're still alive, we're still safe, we're not sick. Let's count the blessings that we have and not the negativities that we encounter. So yes, 100% I agree. Let's choose happiness. Then we'll always win.
Thank you, Mr. Mark, and I totally agree with your statement there. Now, before
excuse me, it's
I
not
close
my
everything,
statement. It's Miss Nia's statement.
Okay. All right. So again, thank you, Mr. Mark, and thank you, Miss Nia, for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure our audiences learned a lot about your presentation today. Okay, so now I will give back the floor to Miss Nadine for the closing remarks.
What a very fruitful discussion we have this afternoon, and we hope that today's webinar could enrich and enlighten your knowledge, especially about finance and business. So all participants, please kindly check the chat box for the information on how to get the e-certificate for today's webinar. And don't forget to join our final live conference next Friday that will discuss about education as one of the hardest hit sector during the pandemic. And finally, before we end the event today, I would like to request all participants to turn on your camera to have a group photo. Yes. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 more. 1, 2, 3. Next one. 1, 2, 3. Lastly, can you give us your last smile? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there you have it. Once again, thank you so much for all our guests, students, and lecturers who joined us in this beautiful afternoon. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
ASEAN way is caring. ASEAN way is sharing.